Welcome, everyone, to Season 3, Episode 11. My guest today is Mr. Zachary Garris. He has a MDiv from RTS-Jackson, Mississippi, as well as a Juris Doctor from Wayne State University Law School. He is licensed to preach at the PCA, and he has also written for a number of publications. He's written for the Mises Institute, he's written for the Abbeville Institute, and for Desiring God, I believe, among others. So, Zach, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show, brother.
Thanks for having me. My pleasure to be here.
It's a pleasure to have you. For those of you who are listening to this, please go to www.patreon.com/thetruepresby and become a patron of the show for as little as $5 a month. I know I ask you guys to do this just about every episode, but we are rapidly reaching the point where the podcast is going to cease to exist if I do not pick up some patrons. So I would like to be able to continue doing this, and I assume you all would like to continue listening to it or watching it. So let's make that happen. All right, so let's get into the meat of the interview, folks. Zachary is the author of a book called Masculine Christianity. I picked it up over Christmas. My wife got it for me as a Christmas gift, and it was very good. So we're going to be talking a little bit about his book. So, Zach, I want to start here. So in most circles and in most places right now, patriarchy has become a forbidden concept, let's put it that way. If you're in more of the radical or feminist end of the world, I guess we could say that it's the feminist equivalent of original sin. So if you would you help explain for my listeners, what exactly is patriarchy?
Yeah, I think at its essence, patriarchy just refers to father rule, and that applies really to all of life. So male rule in the home, the church, but also the civil sphere. And that's an area that I think gets neglected today, especially. I mean, the term patriarchy is, kind of a bad word today, right? It's often associated with abuse. At least that's how feminists portray it. But biblically, I think it's a very good word. It's something we should embrace. And it just refers to God's design of male rule in society.
Okay, so we're going to come back around to that civil aspect because I've got a follow-up question that's rolling through my head that I will want to ask you. But for now, we're just going to keep moving. So there is a process here at the True Presbyterian, despite the fact that I imagine some folks think we fly a little bit by the seat of our pants. So I usually proceed through the interviews, biblically, confessionally, and experientially. And so I want to start with the biblical side of this question. So if you would you just take us to Scripture and build a case for patriarchy from the Bible for me and for my listeners?
Sure. I think patriarchy ultimately has to start in Genesis, creation account. You have God's creation of Adam. Man is made first, and he's given the task, according to Genesis 2:15, to work and keep the garden. And one of the things I argue in the book is that word keep, can also be translated guard. And so there's this protection role that man has in the garden. And of course, once Eve is created, I think there's the assumption that Adam is supposed to protect his wife. And he fails to do that when the serpent enters the garden and deceives her. And so you have this male headship in the garden. I know people argue against that. I think there is male headship there, including federal headship as far as Adam representing all of humanity. It's not Eve, it's Adam.
Right.
And so, male leadership, male headship starts at creation. I think there's more, details we could get into there, but that's the basis. And then this continues throughout, the biblical story. So you have, even at the fall, you have, when God judges Adam and Eve, you see gender roles in Genesis 3. Man is judged related to his work.
Right.
And woman is judged in relation to childbearing. There'll be pain in childbearing. So I think you're even seeing gender roles there I don't think they're a result of the fall, as egalitarians like to argue, but I think you see them continue in the fall. And then that really forms the basis, and the rest of the scriptures build on this. And so, when you look at the Old Testament, you have male rule in every aspect. So you have, prophets are, at least those doing public preaching, are men.
Sure.
You have the priests are all men, and they even have the Levites even have a teaching role. Kings, obviously men, and also even the family unit. One passage I discussed there is Numbers 30, which I think pretty clearly teaches that fathers have authority over their children, particularly their unmarried daughters, and then that authority is passed on to the husband when the woman marries. And so that's just the Old Testament, and then where the debate usually takes place is with the New Testament. It tends to focus there.
Sure.
I don't think we should start there, but the New Testament, of course, builds on the Old. With Ephesians 5, the marriage relationship. The husband is the head of his wife. The wife's to submit to her husband. Colossians 3, 1 Peter 3, and then other passages. 1 Corinthians 11 and 14 gets into this.
Right, Ephesians 5.
Yeah. 1 Timothy 2 and 3 related to elders and teaching in the church. So a lot of the debate revolves around 1 Timothy 2, but I think there's so many other passages that speak to male rule in the home and church particularly, and you really shouldn't start in 1 Timothy 2.
Right. So from your perspective, this is a little bit of a follow-up question. Like, do you see at least part of the problem here when we're talking about patriarchy, or when we're talking about masculine Christianity, maybe to put it another way, is that what we've got is people that are maybe isolating texts instead of looking at kind of the entire arc of Scripture and seeing how things appear sort of over and over again. So do you think this is a case of, not necessarily texts being taken out of context, but them being taken in isolation from other texts?
I do think that's going on. I think, I don't know if it's the influence of dispensationalism or what, but where we just start with the New Testament, and you have to take the Old Testament background into consideration. Like I said, something like Numbers 30, that's rarely discussed.
Right.
And even looking at the, God's design of male leadership in Israel, people don't usually look at those offices, even though the teachers of Israel were clearly men. So that's one thing I discuss in the book, is the egalitarian really has to say that there's been some change in the new covenant where, there's discontinuity, and now women can be, teachers of the church. And so I don't see a lot of egalitarians trying to get into that issue, but I would also say I don't see a lot of complementarians making the arguments I do. So I try to give a broader argument here for male headship.
Right, and this flows nicely out of kind of what we're talking about right now, which is kind of my further follow-up question, and we can narrow in on some specific figures if you want to. But when we talk about rulers particularly in the civil sphere when it comes to patriarchy, or when we talk about the teaching function that we see with prophets and with priests, I know, well, one objection is going to be, well, how in the world do you get to the civil aspect from Scripture? And close on its heels is going to be, well, then what do you do with Deborah, or what do you do with Huldah, which has come up in Amy Bird's book, Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. So would you help us think through that a little bit?
Sure. How do I get to the civil sphere? Well, chapter 11, I address this in the book. And my basic argument is that the civil government is an outgrowth of the family unit. And so you have to understand, male headship in the home. And if that's the case, then what is civil government, but, the collection of families. And so you have oversight, where there's a lot of families living, you need, police and governors and things like this. And so one of the arguments I make is, if a man is the leader of his home and the wife can't lead in the home, then how is it the wife can lead in the civil sphere over other households, over other men? And so I don't see, I don't see how that's supposed to work.
Right.
I'm not alone in making that argument. I mean, John Knox, John Calvin, both get in that issue. Of course, not everybody's a big fan of their comments there, but
yeah,
I think they're on point. And so that's one argument. And I think when you're trying to deal with the examples of like female prophetesses,
right.
What I argue in the book, and actually Origen makes this argument, is that they're doing more of a private or semi-private prophetic ministry. They're not going to the public at large. They're not. I don't think they're doing anything comparable to preaching. And even when you look at the books of the Old Testament, they're all named after male prophets. Isaiah, Jeremiah.
Right.
They're male public ministries.
Right.
Deborah,
so
go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so I think it would be fair to say that what we're dealing with like Deborah and Holden, that sort of thing, are outliers, right? And so we have folks that are trying to build a case on what amount to outliers.
Exactly. And in fact, Deborah's the one people bring up the most. And
oh, yeah.
I make a couple arguments that I think are somewhat unique in my book, which is that when you look at the book of Judges, the judges primarily have a military function. Whether it's Samson or Jephthah or whoever, they're military heroes. And Deborah obviously does not have that role. And so she is not functioning in the same way as the other judges. And that's where Barak comes in, and he actually is supposed to lead, and people debate exactly what's going on there. But that's my reading, is he seems too timid to lead Israel. And so Deborah ends up taking this position. But then when you look at the later books of the Bible, in 1 Samuel and then in the New Testament, Hebrews 11, I believe, where it references the judges, it lists a few of the judges like Samson and Jephthah. It lists Barak. It doesn't list Deborah, and so that's pretty interesting to know. So,
that is.
Another thing I argue is, look, even if, and this is basically what Calvin says, is even if Deborah is understood as a civil leader in the sense that we think of it today, she's still not normative. She's still exceptional, and that, God's design for rule in society is for men to lead.
Okay, so we've kind of got that under our belt, we might say. So I want to talk for just a minute about chapter 4 of your book, and you titled that chapter "Christianity is Patriarchal," and that's going to be bound. That is just bound to make some folks angry. So I imagine that the screeching has already begun. But if you would, just walk us through your argument in that chapter, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I mean, that chapter covers some of what we've already discussed here, but I'll give an outline. I begin by arguing that, God reveals himself in masculine terms. I think that's obvious. He refers to himself as a he, him, even though God, is spirit and is not male, except for Jesus, of course, taking on a male form.
Right.
So I know a lot of feminist, teachers at some of these seminaries and whatnot refer to God as a she. I think that's, awful. Of course, God has not revealed himself that way. And I think we have to ask why. Why has God revealed himself in masculine terms? And I think the reason is that, It's tied with his rule, as king, and that's
Mm,
how he wants to present himself to us. And so that's part of it. And then I get into some of the things I've discussed already, as far as Adam having authority in the
sure,
garden, and then the Old Testament patriarchs. You have them, so you have
sure.
male leadership with Abraham and Jacob and those guys. Um, the leadership of Old Testament Israel, the elders, prophets, judges, priests, kings. But then I get to the New Testament. I look at Jesus. Okay, Jesus
Mm,
is a man, and I think that's significant. I think this is something that often gets neglected. People always want to discuss the apostles, and we can get there, but the second person of the Trinity took on human flesh, and he took on a man's flesh, and he still has a human body, a male body, and that's
contrary to what Jory Micah might say.
that's right. So this is eternal. Jesus is eternally the God Man in male form, and so why is that? Why did God take on a man's body? And I think it's tied with male headship. The second Adam, but there's also a leadership role there. There was leadership expectations with men, according to
Mm,
God's design, and so it couldn't be any other way. God designed it where he would take on a male form. And then when we come to the New Testament offices, there's the apostles, elders, deacons. I think all of those are men. I know some people try to argue there's some female apostles, Junia. I argue against that. I don't think.
right.
I certainly don't think you could conclude that in any reasonable sense. There are a lot of people who hold to female deaconesses. I argue against that, but I also realize there's a lot of people who might embrace patriarchy, who could argue otherwise. I'm not sure that's determinative for this
Right.
issue.
Right. Huh.
I do
So,
also get into historical witness of patriarchy. That's the other thing I close that chapter with is it's not just the Bible, but theologians throughout history have held to this view.
right, and that's actually a question that we're going to come to in just a moment, where we talk about some of the historical aspect of it. So, like myself, you are a confessional Presbyterian. So you would subscribe the Westminster Standards in the same way that I do. And so, do we see this kind of patriarchal viewpoint in the Westminster Standards, or for my Dutch Reformed brethren, if you ain't Dutch, you ain't much, do we see it in the three forms of unity?
Yes and no. I think there are some challenges here because, when the confessions were drafted, they, they weren't debating this stuff. And so I think, a lot of these issues didn't make it into the confession, Westminster Confession, or even the Heidelberg Catechism or Belgic Confession or something like that. So I jotted a couple things down. I mean, the Heidelberg Catechism question and answer 104, speaks of the fifth commandment. So, which is specifically about honoring father and mother, but there's,
Mm,
a broader way to understand the fifth commandment, referring to all authority structures. And so that's why it says
right,
in there, I submit myself with proper obedience, um, to all those in authority over me. So it doesn't mention, husbands and wives or things like that, but I think that's assumed in there. I think it's a
right,
little more explicit in the Westminster Standards. The Westminster Larger Catechism, questions 126 through 133, they deal with hierarchy.
right,
And, the questions are like, what is the general scope of the fifth commandment? And then what are the duties and sins of superiors and inferiors?
right,
And one thing I think it's important to note in here is that it does speak of protection and providing. And so I think this assumes the marriage relationship, even though it doesn't say it. Question 129, what is required of superiors toward their inferiors? And, it's good to note, superiors are supposed to love, pray for, and bless their inferiors. So that would be the husband, right? The husband's supposed to, lovingly care for his wife. But
Give me just a second, Zach. I'm sorry. I'm getting some kind of background noise here. Let me hang on.
Sure.
I'm sorry, brother. I can't figure out where that was coming from.
Not a problem.
You see the marriage relationship as being in the background there when we're talking about duties as far as protection and provision. So if you wouldn't mind, just pick up from there for me. I'm sorry,
Sure.
I had to interrupt you.
That's not a problem. So question 129 of the Westminster Larger Catechism, it says, what is required of superiors toward their inferiors? And it mentions that they should love, pray for, and bless their inferiors. But it also mentions in here protecting and providing for them all things necessary for soul and body. And I have to think, I haven't looked into this much, but I have to think that that's not just referring to civil government. That language sounds primarily about, a husband providing for his wife and children. So, I think that's, got to be what's at least partly behind these questions in the Westminster Larger Catechism.
Yeah, I think that also goes to your point about the state being a collection of families, right? Because those questions start with the Fifth Commandment. What is the duty required of the Fifth Commandment of, honor thy father and mother? And then it gets into civil questions. And so clearly the Westminster divines must have seen some sort of relationship between these two things, right?
Yeah, I think they did. As far as I know, none of those men were advocating, women queens or women in civil leadership. So.
Yeah, and if anyone questions whether or not they were advocating for queens, I would recommend you go check out the first blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women, because that is an awesome book. Followed closely by his excellent second blast of the trumpet against the monstrous regiment of women. John Knox would not have survived in the modern Presbyterian church. So, all right. So we've got that. We kind of got our heads wrapped around that. So we've talked about this biblically. We've talked about it a little bit confessionally, and like you, I think it's assumed in the Westminster Standards and in the three forms of unity because their cultural context is so different from ours that I wouldn't expect anything explicit. But then we also have the witness of church history. So if you wouldn't mind, can you show us kind of the pedigree of Christian patriarchy in church history?
Sure. I think it's good to start off by saying that feminism or egalitarianism, as it's known today, didn't start until recently. So,
right.
The assumed position was patriarchy until about, somewhere in the 18th century or so. And even then it was with, the Quakers started to introduce female clergy, then some Universalists, some Methodists, and you had men like Robert Louis Dabney. He was writing against this stuff in the 1800s. And, that's pretty late. Prior to that, pretty much everyone, including non-Christians, held this, male rule in society. That was God's design. And so, in my book, I have quotes from several different theologians on this. All the way back to Origen. He discusses things here. John Chrysostom, Luther, Calvin. You get into the Reformation, and then I think you say William Gouge. Is that how you say it? At the
William Gouge's Domestical Duties.
Yeah. So that's good stuff. They've reprinted some of his stuff with Reformation heritage, so I encourage people to check his books out. But even guys like Matthew Henry, Bavinck, Palmer, C.S. Lewis, Maybe I'll read from a couple of these guys just to show where this is coming from. I think everybody loves Matthew Henry, his
Right.
commentary, and so for example here you have Matthew Henry on 1 Corinthians 11:3. He says that man has superiority and headship, and then he says that woman should be in subjection and not assume or usurp the man's place. Thus, she should have a mind suited to her rank and not to do anything that looks like an affection of changing places. And so it's pretty offensive language for today's views on gender. And C.S. Lewis, and this is in Mere Christianity, so this is his most popular book. It says the need for some head follows from the idea that marriage is permanent. If marriage is permanent, one or the other party must, in the last resort, have the power of deciding the family policy. And then as to why it should be the man is the head, he asks, is there any very serious wish that it should be the woman? There must be something unnatural about the rule of wives over husbands, because the wives themselves are half ashamed of it and despise the husbands whom they rule. And so that's C.S. Lewis. These are popular authors. We don't even have to get into Reformed theologians specifically. And this was just what everybody believed until 50, 60 years ago.
Right. And so you mentioned that this was kind of something that just sort of everyone believed. Now, there is an author out there, Mrs. Rachel Green Miller, who has argued that we've got this wrong-headed understanding of patriarchy because we've inherited this from the Victorians, who in turn inherited it from the Greeks and Romans. So would you mind, you have a sharp legal mind, so if you wouldn't mind, would you kind of just pull that apart a little bit for us, and can you show us kind of where the problems are with that?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've given that thought, since I read the book, but I mean, I would just say, the burden is on her to show that, and I don't think she does. The Victorian age, having some sort of patriarchal view that they got from Greco-Roman period, I mean, that skips over, all of church history in between.
Right.
And so that just doesn't work. I mean, as I argue in my work here, I cite, Calvin and the Reformation authors, but you can even go before that. You can go back to the medieval period. And there's the Thomist tradition. And so,
Right.
even the early church, I mean, these guys, or how about just the Bible? I mean, we can just say, the Apostle Paul, he's not getting his views on male leadership from the Greco-Roman culture. He's getting it from the Old Testament, right, from the creation account, God's design. So, yeah, that's just really baseless. I don't know why PNR published that book.
Yeah, that's one of those things that's so hard for me to... Like, I have so many questions about that idea that I wish someone had addressed in that, right? So it's like, okay, right, you're in the same place I would be. It's like, okay, look, I don't think Paul is getting his lessons here from the Greco-Roman culture. I'm sorry, I just don't buy it. Second, even if he is, what about common grace? Right, where does the light of nature, natural law, where do those things come into play here? And so even where that's been addressed, I see an attack on natural law that just would make the rankest Van Tillian blush. And I say that as a guy who's pretty strongly presuppositional. So there are all sorts of problems in that. And it shocks me that no one in the process of reviewing this book before it was published or anything else went, hey, this is a problem. So yeah, I'm with you on that. I don't understand how PNR Publishing let that book get through the editorial process, because there were some real problems there.
Yeah, I will add here. I think it's a good point to do so. This is one thing I discuss in here as far as one of the inadequacies I think of complementarianism And it's not all of them, but many men who have advocated or taught using the label complementarian, they tend to neglect natural law and particularly creation's teaching on these things as far as God's design. There's it's not just that God said men are supposed to lead and rule, but the why. As far as tied with male nature, the differing natures between men and women. And so that's something I try to stress in the book, because I think that really that grounds our reasoning. It's not just male leadership because God said so, but he's designed men's and women's bodies and personalities and all of these things in this way. And so that's even why unbelievers would practice male leadership to some extent, and I think that's seen in most of society. So it's just the way God made it.
Yeah. So if we look at more recent history, I think it's fair to say that feminism has, from its very inception, been completely opposed to the idea of patriarchy in any form. And it did take special aim, we should say, at Christianity and its view of male headship in the home and its view of male elders in the church. And you can find that, I believe some of that's in the writings of Elizabeth Cady Stanton. But what are some of the common feminist misunderstandings that you see of Christian patriarchy and maybe how it's being misrepresented?
Well, I think the biggest misunderstanding that I can think of is that patriarchy, even Christian patriarchy, is full of male abuse. That's often the charge, is that it involves men abusing women, and it's not for the good of everybody. And I think that's just false. I think God's design is, of course, for the good of everyone. And so really the question here is this God's design? And I think scriptures clearly teach this. So, I don't know. I think it depends. Are you talking about Christian feminist or secular feminist? There is a difference, but I think there's, in some ways there's other problems with Christian feminism, is where they're getting this. I think, all feminists think that male rule, and they don't like the word rule, so they would say male rule, even a godly male rule, is oppressive towards women.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so it's keeping them locked up rather than freeing them up to pursue a career like a man, or be as successful, make money, all of these things, whatever it is. And I think at the end of the day, I'm not sure that feminists misunderstand patriarchy so much as they just don't like it. I think that's really what's the root of the problem. And so they tend to misrepresent it because they just don't like the way God has designed things. And so I don't know if there's more to be said there as far as correcting things. I think they just kind of slander, Christian patriarchy.
Right. Yeah. So at least for me, like when I think about that, I make a distinction kind of in my head between the folks that are your feminist leaders, you might say. So whomever the editor of Ms. Magazine is right now, we'll take her as an example, versus the average high school girl. She's a senior in high school and she's just sort of imbibed feminism without ever really thinking about it. And so what I often see is misunderstanding sort of at the level of the man on the street, and then flat out misrepresentation among the leadership of the movement. And so I'm thinking in that question of more addressing people who have simply assumed feminism and never really given it any thought, I guess I would say.
This just came to my mind. For the average person, I think they misunderstand the word equality. And because this is very common, many just average people will call themselves feminists, and you ask them, well, why are you a feminist? And they say, well, I believe in equality. Men and women are equal. And I think like even patriarchalists can say, yes, but it depends what you mean there. So we have to explain this word equal or equality. So, the Bible affirms equality of value or worth of men and women. We're
Mm-hmm.
not saying that men are more valuable than women. In fact, Christian patriarchy teaches that men are supposed to protect women because they're valuable, right? We're supposed to honor our wives. They
Right.
should have a high place in the home. So it's actually, a glorious thing. But we don't mean they're equal in the sense of, having the same duties and roles. And so that's where you have to press people. I think a lot of people just don't think these things through. And so there are misunderstandings regarding equality.
Yeah, I definitely think that you're on the right track there. When the equality argument comes up, sometimes I just can't help myself, and I wind up responding to that by saying, like, really? So you believe that men and women are equal? Then why aren't there an equal number of shelters for homeless men or for abused men? And as soon as you start asking those sorts of detailed questions about what being equal really looks like societally, that's usually when the feminist screeching begins. My personal favorite was a conversation where I'm like, look, more men commit suicide by leaps and bounds more frequently than women. And I had someone say, well, women attempt suicide more. I'm like, yeah, because trying to die is so much worse than actually dying. Right? Like that makes sense. So, we definitely have a very strange view, or a very strange, ill-considered understanding of what we mean when we say equal. And so I do think that there is very much something to that. So one of the things that I have found really interesting in this, with your book coming out, with a lot of things that have led up to this, is it seems, at least to me, very much like there is a resurgence of Christian patriarchy in the Presbyterian and Reformed world. Now, obviously, there are folks out there who think that that's a very bad thing, and there are folks out there that think that's a very good thing. So why is it that you think that Christian patriarchy is experiencing this resurgence right now?
Yeah, I agree with your observation. I do think this is taking place, and I think there's probably a couple things going on. One is people are kind of tired of our feminist culture. It's gotten out of control, right? It's not just the feminism of old, with women wanting to go into the workplace, but people aren't having very many kids. You see the gender madness, right, where it's just turned into I'm not even sure this is feminism, but just the idea of transgenderism, where a man can supposedly become a woman and vice versa. So you're just seeing the downplay of masculinity and femininity, and
Right.
and so people are just kind of sick of it. They're like, they know better. I think that's part of it. Is just, this is kind of like the nature argument, is everyone knows that men are different from women. And so feminism is flying in the face of nature. And so feminism can't win. It's obviously wrong. And, so it shouldn't surprise us that, patriarchy and critique of feminism is actually, successful. I mean, that's how it should be. Feminism is, I think it's the bigger question is, how did feminism become so popular? When it's so unnatural.
Right, and that actually is really my next question, because alongside this growing resurgence of respect for and admiration of patriarchy within a corner of the conservative, Reformed, and Presbyterian world, it also seems like there's a growing sort of neo-egalitarianism that's creeping into Presbyterian and Reformed churches. And so, would you mind talking about that for a little bit?
Yeah, I think this is the right way to describe it. Is a form of neo-egalitarianism, and I think there's a couple things happening here. First is that many pastors and theologians are neglecting to teach on gender roles, and so there's just been this general neglect. And so a lot of people just don't know what the Bible says. A lot of churchgoers don't know what the scriptures teach on these things. And so this leads to the congregations drifting towards egalitarianism or feminism, because that's the cultural pressure. So that's one thing happening. The second is that there's just a softening of even complementarianism by pastors and theologians.
Sure.
And so, some people make this distinction between broad and narrow complementarianism. I think that's actually helpful because, broad complementarianism can be pretty close to, patriarchy.
Sure.
Whereas narrow complementarianism is certainly not. These advocates of this position try to say that, a man should still have leadership in, the home and the church, but they water this down so much that sometimes it's meaningless. And
Oh yeah.
So some egalitarians, I have a quote in there. He said that complementarians, functionally aren't very different from egalitarians, and that's probably true in a lot of cases. And so you have just a softening of the position that's supposed to be affirming the Bible's teaching on gender roles, complementarianism, which really this was just a position that came about 1980s. It's rather new. And as I argue, it deviated some ways from the biblical teaching, so I want to go further and affirm patriarchy, which I think is really just going back to the traditional biblical position. But all of this has led to things like you mentioned Rachel Greenmiller's book, Beyond Authority and Submission, and then of course we also have Amy Bird's book, Recovering from Biblical Manhood and Womanhood. So she's actually arguing that the complementarian work by Piper and Grudem, that actually is bad, but for the wrong reasons, in my opinion. I argue there's problems with it because it really didn't go far enough. She's saying it goes too far. It's abusive towards women or whatever it is she claims. And I think what's interesting in there is that both of those authors would tell you they're not egalitarians. I know Miller will say she's not a complementarian, but she doesn't call herself egalitarian. And Bird, I don't know what she's calling herself these days, but she was using the label, I believe, complementarian.
Right.
And, this is odd because, they basically undermine male headship in a variety of ways, including Bird argues that, Junia was a woman apostle. That's pretty bad in my opinion, because if that's the case, then why does she still hold that women can't be pastors? I'm not sure, but this narrow complementarianism or neo-egalitarianism, I think there's maybe both going on. These seem to be dominating even the Reformed churches, and I think this is a huge problem. And so this is maybe where you're starting to see in potential problems in the Reformed world is you have this kind of soft complementarian or neo-egalitarian position, and then you have the patriarchal position, and these groups are not going to get along, and especially the more cultural pressure there is on these issues. I know where I land in there, and I'd like to see the Reformed churches. They're supposed to be conservative, affirming, I think, a more robust biblical position.
Yeah, I think there's a lot that's happening there. So, kind of with that in mind, in your opinion at least, what are some of the challenges that, moderately or strongly patriarchal guys are facing or will face in the church right now or, in the near future?
Yeah, I think this is, primarily a problem for those who are wanting to enter pastoral ministry or be elders in their churches.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sure it's as much a problem if you're just a lay person. They're probably not going to get on your case. But I think that the more the congregations and even sessions drift towards progressivism or feminism, just any of these things, they're not going to want to hire men who take a firmer stance, and so that's going to be hard to get jobs, I guess, for people holding the patriarchal position. A lot of the sessions, I think, are wanting. Sometimes they throw out this word "winsome." They want to be winsome on controversial issues, And the problem is what they mean by that is that they really don't want you to talk about these things.
Right.
Or if you do, you need to, do everything you can to not upset anyone. And I just don't think that's possible today. You can say these things as kindly and gently as you want, but at the end of the day, you're saying that a wife has to submit to her husband, and that women should not be focusing on careers over children, and that women should not be governors or presidents, and this goes against the cultural tide, and so you're going to upset people, even in the church, and so yeah, I think I don't know what this is going to lead to. It's going to lead to some problems, maybe more denomination shifting, maybe more church planting. Obviously, I'd like to see the PCA affirm patriarchal teaching, and I know some pastors do, some churches, but I really don't know what's going to happen here.
Yeah. So the theme for this season is Fight for the Future. And so and the title of this episode is Fight for Christian Patriarchy. So what role does fighting for a Christian patriarchy play in a fight for the future?
Well, I think it plays a huge role, and I think the reason is that as go the men, so go the women and children. As go the male leadership, so goes the rest of society, the church, the families, everything. And so we need strong male leadership. And if we lose that, then what's left? I guess an effeminate church, or secular men running the show, I think is more likely what happens.
Right.
So yeah, I really think strong male rule, particularly godly male rule, is the key to turning things around in America. But not even just turning it around. It's just also being able to withstand coming persecution. We need to stand firm, and so that requires that as Paul says, act like men. Right? We need to be strong and courageous, and we need godly male leadership, and that's really all we're saying with patriarchy. Is we're calling the men to be and act like men, and the women to be and act like women. Sorry, I can't hear you, Hutch.
Okay, sorry, that was my fault.
Okay.
Because we really do fly by our seat of the seat of our pants here at the True Presbyterian. So, as I was saying, I know that there are a lot of men who are listening to this because I've seen the demographics for my podcast listeners. Thank you very much, Spotify, for giving me that information. So, for those guys, what are some ways that they can be fighting for a God-honoring, Christ-exalting patriarchy in their own churches? And I ask it that way for a specific reason. About 8 months ago, I had an interaction online on the Tweeter before I got off of it with Timothy Isaiah Cho, who was very clear that there is no such thing as a God-honoring, Christ-exalting patriarchy. So, what are some ways that we can fight for a God-honoring, a Christ-exalting patriarchy?
Well, I think the first thing that we need to do is model this ourselves. So you have to start with you and your family, and creating a joyful atmosphere. And really, that's what it should be, right? If we follow God's design, it should bring us joy and blessings. And so I think starting with our own family, getting our own family in order, our own household in order, where the husband leads, the wife submits, raise the children well. You start there, but also we should do more than that, which is, try to persuade and convince other people in the church of this view of Scripture's teaching ultimately.
Right.
And I think, it does help if we can ultimately reach pastors and elders. And so, giving them literature. This is one of the reasons I wrote my book. I'm hoping it is something that, pastors can read and it helps them think through these things. If not totally change their mind, that's my hope. So take them to the Scriptures. I mean, the Bible's very clear on some of these things. And so that's part of it. I mean, have some discussions, some debates. And I would also say, show them how feminism is harming our churches. Just some of the best arguments are, look how few children people are having. Look what the public schools are doing, the kids. And some of these are just obvious things. And so, I think that's really what we should be doing in our churches.
All right. Well, folks, I am going to end this episode right here. And I would invite you guys, please stick around, because Wednesday of this week, we're going to have after the interview with Mr. Garris. And he and I are going to talk a little bit about a follow-up question. So, Zach, thanks again for coming on the show, brother. I really appreciate you joining me.